when I left Florida and I moved to California, my doctors at Dana-Farber contacted the doctors at UCLA Medical Center. So I always had a team there for my surveillance, and they were sharing the data back and forth of how I was doing. Again, no internet. So this is all just an analog phone line, right? Or a letter I would receive in the mail, to go into UCLA, and then they would send it back.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition, a podcast about making the most of the changes we're given. As a married father of 3 teenagers, a longtime global business executive and adventurer, I've been through hundreds of transitions in my life. Many have been difficult, but all have led to a depth and richness I could never have imagined. You'll get to hear all about them on this podcast so that together we can create more love and joy in our lives, no matter what transitions we are going through. Welcome back to another episode of Life in Transition podcast. I am very excited to have Howard Brown here with us today, Mr. Shining Brightly. And Howard helps struggling leaders get back on track. But a few more sentences about that. He's a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, best-selling author, award-winning international speaker, inspirational podcaster. I can speak from my personal experience. He's a survivorship coach, which we'll hear a little bit more about, a health technology consultant, and 2-time stage 4 cancer survivor. He shares the keys to leading a resilient life with the hope that it drives successful community development in both leaders and business. And Howard, I'm really excited to have made your acquaintance, and I'm really excited to welcome you to Life in Transition. You've definitely been through quite a few.
I have. Art, I'm very excited to be here as well. It's an honor, and so glad to speak to you and your audience today.
Thank you, Howard. Jumping right in, what would you consider to be one of the most significant or meaningful transformational transitions that you've had in your life, Howard?
Well, I would say getting married is one of them, but I think that what you're leading to is that getting diagnosed, telling you to get your affairs in order once at age 23 and a half, and then again at age 50. Those were huge transitions. Lots of little ones along the way, right? But those are big, game changers. My whole life came to a screeching halt 2 times when I got 2 stage 4 diagnosis for 2 different types of cancer.
So what was that? What was that like? Like, you're 30 years old and you get told you have, very little time left to live and get your affairs in order. What goes through your mind? What do you feel? What's happening at that point?
So I was 23, actually.
Sorry.
It's okay. I just graduated Babson College, and I had had a couple years of work experience, and I was on my way to Dayton, Ohio. I was being promoted to a national director at 23. I mean, my career was going well.
Right.
And I looked in the rearview mirror, and I saw a little red speck on my cheekbone. And I got off to get gas, and I actually used a payphone, okay, because this is 1989.
Right.
And I called my mom and dad, checked in, and I said, something just popped up on my cheekbone near my left ear. And, I don't think it's anything. But I noticed it. So I told them about it. So they would ask me about it then whenever I would talk to them. So I made it to Dayton, Ohio, and it got bigger. And it started to kind of be purplish. But it didn't hurt. But I was going to the gym. I really got into my my career. I was working late. I was just, you want to make a good impression, right? New out at corporate headquarters for NCR Corporation, And so my mom came out a couple weeks later, and this is when you could actually go meet someone at the gate. You don't have to wait behind security. So I met her at the gate, and she looked at me, and I wore glasses, and she was like, "Yeah, we got to get that checked out." But we didn't know anybody. I knew some people at work. I could have asked for doctors and things like that. But she, while I was working, was getting me sheets, getting me dishes, getting me set up because, you need those things. And I was working, and I was probably living on paper plates. Very fortunately, about a week later, I was speaking in Boston. So I went in a day early to see them. And I went in on a Friday night. And that Saturday morning, my dad and I would always go to the gym or go play tennis or go, to the track or something, and then go to breakfast. Well, he played a trick on me, and we actually went to a community hospital emergency room. And, we signed in, they saw us, the doctor says it's a cyst, here's some, antibiotic, go on your way. My dad and I didn't work out. We just went to breakfast and didn't really think of it. I said, yeah, we'll take this and it'll be good. So come Monday morning, I'm speaking in Boston, not feeling good. And I finish, probably about 2 o'clock, and I head back to the suburbs. And my dad, I said, I'm not feeling good. And so he takes me back to the same hospital, the same doctors on duty. This time, they ended up taking not one, but two biopsies. They took a piece of it, stitched me up. And my dad then took me to dinner and my mom and to the airport. I was flying down to New York or Florida or Philadelphia, I don't know, somewhere else. And I kind of forgot about it. And it took them a long time to get back to us. And my parents were freaking out. They lost some weight. And again, there's no cell phones. You're talking on landlines here, right? There's no internet. This is 1989. So finally I get called back and I go to this little community hospital, my mom and dad, and I'm zipping in and zipping out. I'm in an Armani suit. And they said, you're going to Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And it didn't register with me. We get to Dana-Farber in
So
Boston.
they
Said,
told you that, and you still, at that time, you still didn't, it didn't like hit you. As 23 years old, you're invincible, you're on top of the world.
yes.
It didn't hit you that you had cancer. Like if you're going to the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute,
No,
you had
no, it
serious
didn't.
cancer.
No,
Wow.
it didn't at all. So I get there, and it's a happy place, right, for a cancer institute. But I go there. They finally check us in. They take a ton of tests, and I got to go sit in the waiting room. And one waiting room is, I would call it older or old people. I'm 23. I didn't know where I belonged. So I looked at the other waiting room, which is the Jimmy Fund, which is kids. These are pediatrics. So
Right, and then you don't belong there either.
not really, but I go sit with them,
Right.
because they don't know what's going on. I didn't know what's going on. So we get called back finally to this doctor, George Canales, who invented chemotherapy for blood cancers. And there was a young doctor behind him standing up, and he had a big mahogany desk, and he had all these awards. My parents were actually peripheral to me. I was sitting in front, and they were sitting in two side seats. And he says, Mr. Brown, you have stage 4 T-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, accelerated, meaning it's very fast growing, and we got to knock it out. And I basically was like, what? What's he saying? I look up at this young doctor, probably 7 years older than me, Dr. Eric Rubin. What's he saying? I look back at my mom, and she's in tears. My dad's a statue, and I didn't really hear another word. So I was I call it the deer in the headlights, or just complete denial.
Sure.
I felt fine.
Right.
But at this time, it's a golf ball. It's big.
Oh, wow.
And
that fast.
yes. And if I didn't have that tell, it could have been fatal. So that's a good tell, actually. So we go home that night, and we invite my sister. I have a twin. That's important later. We invite her over for dinner. And we don't tell her anything yet, right? But my dad goes to the library and gets a book on cancer. I think it was 20 years old. Okay. We didn't know anything. So we sat around the dinner table. We had this book. We're looking up.
And this is in Massachusetts, where you were living in Ohio, but this is in Massachusetts, the family home.
I was in the suburbs of Boston called Framingham, Mass, where I grew up. And we're sitting around the table, and we're doing a lot of crying. I'm not sure why we were crying, because we didn't know what we didn't know, but we knew it was bad news then. So it hit me. It was like, yeah, this isn't good. So I basically started to go to Dana-Farber every single day for tests. And then they tell you they're going to put you on chemotherapy, and they tell you what chemotherapy is, and they tell you all the side effects of chemotherapy. And so this is over about a 3-day period. And then the 4th day, I'm going to do chemotherapy. So I couldn't sleep at all, because I still didn't really imagine what it was, right? I had never known anyone that had it. I had some older relatives, pass away, but I don't even think they did treatment. They just passed away, right? So I get to the hospital that day. We do a bunch of tests, and then Dr. Rubin comes out and he says, Howard, we're not doing chemo today. And I was like freaking out. I was like, you told me that, this is really serious. I got to do chemo. And he says, well, it's unsafe to do chemo. Your liver function test is not right. We'll try again tomorrow. And he says, but the day's not lost. He goes, we're going to send you on a field trip. And I was like, am I in 3rd grade? Am I going on a field trip? But he said, no, we're going on a field trip. And I'm not sure why he decided this. And I even interviewed him and asked him this. And he said, good doctoring. But he had this vision. And again, I didn't know if I was going to live or die. And chances are, when you are stage 4 accelerated for blood cancer, that's when you're getting your affairs in order. So the time clock is
Had
ticking.
they given you a, like, hey, you have 6 months to live, or you have 3 months to live, or
So that's what everyone tells you. They don't want to come out and say that to you. All right. But if you do some research and you talk to others, they say it's fatal. So I ended up going to the cryogenic center, and I was like, cryo what? What is that? And he says, you're going to go donate some sperm. He goes, just in case. He goes, it might feel good. I was like, oh, really? I came back the next day and I started chemotherapy. Now, I kind of forgot about it. My dad was paying my bills. So you get a bill once a month. I wasn't worried about that. I was worried about staying alive. And unfortunately, the chemotherapy is very intense. It eliminates your immune system. Okay. And I started doing a ton of blood transfusions, mostly red cells and platelets. Okay. That actually clot and heal you. And so I was very susceptible. Became the boy in the bubble. My mom was keeping the house very clean. I could barely have friends over. I was 23. I was playing Nintendo. Um, and I had a lot of alone time, but I moved back in with mom and dad, and I didn't get
and
any
did
good
you
news.
take leave from work, or did you quit your job at that point, or what happened professionally at that point?
When I got diagnosed, I stayed on for a little bit, just clinging on, and I would go to the local office where I was from. There was outside a Boston office and a suburban office. I would go in, right? But within 2 weeks, I lost my hair, so I was now bald, and it wasn't great to be around people
Right,
because I could
because
get
your immune
cold.
system's completely compromised, yeah.
Right. So I was doing it, and finally, I got a message from the company: you're going on long-term disability. And thank God I had a big company that was doing that,
Yeah,
and I had
yeah.
great benefits. So I was living at Dana-Farber, doing blood transfusions, doing chemotherapy. Nothing was working. And then my grandparents, who were freaking out, who lived down in Florida, said, "Come on down, come down, get some sunshine. We're not going to be around a lot of people, right? But we'll go out and have a meal, but get some warm weather with my mom." So my mom and I went down to visit them. And within a few days, I broke out all over my skin. I had a skin rash, and that basically it was a cancer was spreading. That's another tell.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so,
So that
yes,
rash was actually a cancerous rash.
correct.
Wow.
The stay down there was very short. We left in a hurry, flew back up to Dana-Farber, and they start a whole new chemo cocktail. So they try something else, right? And also, I did get some colds, and when you go neutropenic, you have to go to the hospital because they put you on antibiotics and IV antibiotics, IV antifungals. They're just trying to clean you out there. So I was spending quite a bit of time in the hospital. I even, they snuck me out for my birthday against doctor's orders, and we went out to dinner because of my twin sister. But we only got one piece of good news, and that was in late February. Remember, I got diagnosed in October, so we're hitting the 6-month time frame. But my sister went in for a bone marrow, basically to find out if she was an exact match. So they swab your cheek, but then they take blood to see if you're an exact, what's called HLA match. She came back to be an exact match, even though she was a girl, and even though she was 5 minutes older, and we were not, we were fraternal
You're
twins.
fraternal, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, right. We're not identical, and that turned out to be a really good thing. And that piece of good news is she was a 1 in 25,000 match.
Oh, wow.
It was really a big miracle. And so, but I was nowhere near being ready for a bone marrow transplant. Now it's called the stem cell transplant. And Dana-Farber had inpatient patients. They don't have that anymore. So throughout the spring, they were trying to figure out the right cocktail to get me to some type of stability. So on May 17th, I went into Dana-Farber, and they just hit me up with the whole kitchen sink. They were already hitting me with the kitchen sink, but they hit me up with a lot of chemotherapy and twice daily full body irradiation. And it was pretty intense stuff for a week. So I had no immune system. They were cleaned out. And my sister went in, and she ended up going in that morning of the May 24th at 6 a.m. and they extracted from her hip bones bone marrow. They clean it out, and then they brought it into me at 5:44 that afternoon. Now, when you actually do a transplant of organs or blood or anything, they first tell you that it couldn't work. It could kill you right away.
Right.
Your
Right.
body could reject it.
Rejected, yeah.
It could cause significant side effects, or it could kill you little later on, or you could get what's called graft versus host disease, where it really is figuring out and the body's trying to fight it. Well, I had a very small amount of that, but so they infused this small bag inside of me, and I had 20 people in the room, and I was in an isolated room where you gowned it up. All you could see is people's eyes, and you actually had to scrub in because I had no immune system and put on a gown. And so I'm left with my mom. They wheeled my sister over from the Brigham and Women Hospital. I waved her in the door, said, "I love you, thank you." But the bag finally emptied, and I got just her in the room. And I looked back up at my mom. I go, "Mom, put that in your pocket." I go, "They're just going to throw it away." So nobody does that, but I did it for some reason. So she did. She put it in her pocket. So then they just watch you. They watch you to see how my sister's bone marrow will become my my blood system and my DNA and my immune system. And slowly but surely, it took 34 days, but it worked. It was starting to do that. Now, is it going to eradicate the cancer? That's another whole thing. So they put me on a clinical trial. I finally got out. I got to a main floor. I finally got released to home, but my immune system is very still compromised. I had to be
So
very
this is
careful.
around July now.
Yeah, end of June, July. And so in July, they put me on a clinical trial. So when you go on a clinical trial, they tell you it can kill you. So this is something called interleukin-2. It was the grandfather of immunotherapies. So after transplant, it was very new. So I was arm 1, which means it's the first people, and I was patient 4 to ever do it.
Oh, wow.
But it worked. I basically wore like a fanny pack, and they put a cartridge in there, and every Tuesday I'd go in for an oil change. And I got to tell you, you wait a lot in the waiting room. You also spend a lot of time with your nurses. Your nurses are your source of information. Your doctor time is very minimal, but because I was there a lot, my mom and I were there, and we commuted. It was about 22 miles away, but it takes 30 minutes to get in. The parking garage knew us. Everybody knew us because we were there a lot. And I will tell you, I just want to tell you, my mom did a very special thing. So when you go to Dana-Farber, they've got candy everywhere because they want sweetness. All right, cancer and sugar aren't good for you. I'll state that.
Exactly.
But there's little kids there, and you're sitting there all day long. So we show up one day, and there's no candy. And my mom loves candy. She's an M&M, Junior Mints, Hershey's, whatever. She loves her candy, jelly beans, all that stuff. So she goes to the one of the administrators there and says, "Why is there no candy?" She goes, "We're out. We work off of donations." My mom goes, "I'll take care of that." So my mom ended up calling. We didn't have cell phones. She just did it by landline. About 10 different candy places in and around Boston, from stores to manufacturers. All of a sudden, we walked in and there was lots of candy. My mom kept that up for 10 years.
Wow. So
she had
people
candy
that were willing to either give or she would pay for the candy to come into Dana-Farber.
She's a force in nature. So, my NCR did a blood.
How come that doesn't surprise me, Howard?
I don't know, but you learn. It was a good thing. So, and NCR did a blood drive, and we got 400 people from Babson College and from my friends and neighbors and family to come in and give blood because I was going through a lot of blood transfusions. So she was very an activist on that. So it's funny that I'm doing my scans, and in December I finished the clinical trial, and they basically tell you, "We'll see you in 90 days." So you go from this intensity of a patient to like, what do I do next? Right. So I said to my mom and dad, who were, listen, they were my caregivers, but it was intense living under them because they were keeping the place clean and they were just wanted their son to live. But I said, "Mom and Dad, I'm also, now, going to be 5 years old. I'm going to go down to Florida to my friend in Tampa who's getting divorced." And she said, "Well, you can't go alone." So 2 of my high school friends came down to babysit me, and they made arrangements with the cancer center down in Tampa to do my surveillance.
Okay.
To do my blood work. I had to go in and do blood work monthly and then do scans every quarter. So I stayed down there. And then I on a typewriter, I wrote a letter to NCR Corporation and said, "I'm here. I'm alive. I missed the trip to Acapulco. Can I come to Hawaii?" That took a little brass to do that, but they sent me a typewriter letter back and said, "Sure," with the doctor's approval. So I went to Hawaii. So I stayed down in Florida. We went to the Super Bowl. It was Giants Bills, and my friends, we were playing golf. I was basically putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. emotionally, physically. My career was going to come in a little bit later, but in relationships, I was pretty isolated. So I was basically with my two high school, Robbie and Bobby. We went to Disneyland. We visited a friend at University of Florida. We did the theme parks. We went down to Miami to the beach. I basically was reintegrating back into my life, and very special thanks to David Herman who let me stay there. Who was an NCR guy, worked with me, and so that was great. So I went to Hawaii with David Herman as my babysitter. Okay, and it's not
Did
often.
NCR, they paid for your plus one? He was your plus one?
No, he worked for NCR. He had earned the trip
Oh,
too.
okay. Okay,
But
great.
he was my roommate, and he was under strict orders to, make sure that I would go to bed early, not drink any alcohol, and not that he had much control over me, anyways. But I actually, you got invited to lunch with the president and the CEO, and they said, Howard, we want to, meet you and have lunch with you, And at the end, they're like, do you want to come back to work? We've got a job for you. You can take your old job in Boston. And I said, no, I want warm weather. And so they offered me a job in Atlanta in the banking division, or they offered me a job in the network products division in LA. And so after I left there, I went on interviews. I interviewed in Atlanta, stayed there for a few days, got to know the town. It was lovely. And I also did the same thing in Los Angeles. And I ended up choosing Los Angeles because I wanted to be able to play basketball outdoors whenever I wanted.
Right.
So I basically moved to LA that June or May of 91. I'm sorry, 135 pounds and bald, and
Wow.
not knowing many people.
Right. So let
And
me
it
back
was
up for
great.
a second because it's a fascinating story, and I'm curious about like what's underneath the story. So you said there was a point when you first showed up at Dana Farber.
Yeah,
You had no idea what you were in for. You
right.
had no idea how serious it was. But some point along the way there, it registered. When was that, and what was that feeling like? Like, I'm 23 years old. I thought I was on top of the world. Now my world might really be ending. Or did you tell yourself, no, I'm going to find a way to beat this? Like, what was your mindset? What was the feelings? What was your emotions that were going on at that time
Uh,
when it sunk in what you had to fight?
yeah, I'm glad we'll dig deeper on this because it sunk in really hard when I went to my 5th year reunion. Okay, I
From
was
high
vice
school?
president of my high school class. I was a big jock, on the basketball team, and I was a VP of the class. So I knew everybody. Everyone knew me and knew my sister a little bit. She was much more introverted. I was much more extroverted. I went there and I had to wear gloves. I actually had to wear a mask. So all that stuff. But I took the mask off. My mother came with me because I was only limited to a very small period of time. So I got up there and I spoke. And I actually spoke how precious life was. I talked about a few people, even 5 years out. We lost two of our high school people that died. And this is during the Gulf War. So some of our people were over in service. And I heard guys are cruel. He's a dead man walking, poor bastard. And it hit me there. I was like, I'm not well. I'm not well, and I don't know what the future holds. Now, that was a real big thing, at a high school reunion because I'm looking around going, wow,
Everybody else is thinking about getting married and starting families and careers, and you're thinking about whether you're going to make it or not.
they were thinking about getting loaded up and drinking and having a fun time at the reunion, right? And starting their careers or moving into it. So that hit me. And when I was failing each of the cocktails that they were providing to me, that was bad, like breaking out in the rash. So I'm like, I'm not getting any better. So the only piece of good news was that bone marrow transplant, my twin sister. So I was focused on that. Okay. And I knew there was a huge risk to that, but I was really focused on getting to that point and getting to that. And when I got my date and all that, and again, I'm normally a very, very positive, the glass is half full. I'm a very strong mental toughness type of guy. I was an athlete. I knew this was a big race. And so I tried to stay positive, but there were so many dark days and I was alone, as I said, a lot. So that's the theme of the book is I was walking in darkness and I was learning. I was learning about myself. I was learning how to rely on others. I basically, my mom and dad, taking care of a baby again. That was hard, really hard. It was a little smothering, but they were doing what they thought to do because our backs were against the wall. We were on the front lines. We're on the
Right.
firing line. So
Right.
I'm glad you asked that.
Was there
Um,
ever a time at that time, was there ever, I mean, I know mathematically the chances were pretty small, but was there ever a time where you really thought you weren't going to make it?
a long time ago, but I would say that no. I had it was still an analog world, but no, I
Yeah. Yeah.
still was going to go down kicking and fight until the
Yeah.
end.
And I will say, adding from my own experience and the research that is done by Ellen Langler, that probably had a lot to do with why you did make it as well.
I think so too.
Right.
Yeah.
That outlook, like the research that she's done is just fascinating about how, that there's no, people talk about the mind body connection. She said there's no connection. It's just one word,
Hmm.
mind body. Right. And all the research that she's done to support that. But no, thank you for sharing that. I'm curious about that mindset, and for other people going through that, like what that takes to come through. So this is year 23, and then you're now in California, and you're just being monitored to see if was it already to NED, to no evidence of disease at that point,
Yeah, they
or
didn't even call it that then.
they called it
That term
remission.
came later. That was 5-year remission. So when I left Florida and I moved to California, my doctors at Dana-Farber contacted the doctors at UCLA Medical Center. So I always had a team there for my surveillance, and they were sharing the data back and forth of how I was doing, right? And again, no internet, so this is all just an analog phone line, right? Or a letter I would receive in the mail, to go into UCLA, and then they would send it back. But here's the thing. Um, in the warm weather, I actually had to build up my stamina again. 135 pounds and bald. So I was challenged with, my emotional well-being and my mental toughness. I was challenged with my physicalness. So I was going to the gym. I was walking on the beach. I was starting to play basketball again. And I was building up again. And that's why I call myself Humpty Dumpty. I'm getting ready to put myself back up on the wall. I was trying to work a full day, right? I was in sales. So I actually was in and out of the office, but I had to build that back up. My career was back, but it was just at the beginning again. And relationships. I wasn't around a lot of people for a couple of years, that I didn't know. So I was starting to get social again. And one of my friends that I played basketball with said, a Jewish guy named Craig Shiro. And it's funny, I got introduced from my dad, who's one of his clients in Maine. And he loved basketball. And he said, hey, there's this good program at the Jewish Communities Federation in LA. It's a speakers thing. And there's great young people and there's some hot looking women. And you'll like it. So I signed up for it. And I ended up meeting my wife, Lisa, through this program. And the program also, after you go through it for about 9 months, they want you to do other volunteer work. And so we went to this open fair where there was other volunteer spots in the Jewish community. And I'm walking around with Lisa. We had been dating for a few months. And she said, oh, you'd be a great Jewish big brother. And so I signed up for that program. I got screened, and they do a background check. And I ended up getting matched to a young boy who was 10 named Ian Ellis, whose dad was in prison. And his mother, they lived sort of in Santa Monica, but in rent control and not in a great economic situation. And I started to understand that it's actually, not what you get in this world, it's what you give. And I started to hang out with Ian and never had a little brother. And we did 10-year-old stuff like riding a bike, or he beat me playing chess on the beach. I took him to his first rock concert, a couple of years later. And I'm very proud to say that not all these matches work out, right? Mine actually went from age 10 to 18 officially. And because of that, he got scholarship money to go to UC Santa Cruz for his undergrad. He got scholarship money to get his master's at Florida State, and he got scholarship money to go to Hastings Law School, and he's a lawyer. And we are now matched for 31 years. He has his own son, Noble, and his wife, Sarah. And I stood up for him in his wedding. And
Oh, wow.
my daughter calls him Uncle Ian. We are family.
Right.
So
Oh, that's
these
awesome.
are the things that, in putting myself back together again, were great. It was just amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I love that about what you give, which I read here in your book. It is really, that is the measure of life, right? And that's
Right.
really great to have learned that when you were, 25,
Yeah. It was great.
instead of most people maybe start to think about that when they're 50. In some ways, maybe it was a very hard road to get there, but it's in some ways what a blessing to start to learn that when you're 25.
So I got my life back, right? And so I'm now married. We're doing great things together. My career is taking off. AT&T bought NCR. I took early retirement. I went to a startup called Avid. I started a
You took early
broadcast division.
retirement at what, 35 years old or
No,
something,
no,
or
at 27. At 27.
27? Holy cow!
Yeah, yeah. Because AT&T needed to, they had
Get rid of
500,000 in the
people, right?
workforce. It
Right.
was just, yeah. So I ended up taking early retirement, and I went to this startup called Avid Technology that changed from analog to digital how television was made and how films were made and how commercials were made. And that is networking, voice, data, video, right? And I loved it. And I ended up starting a unit out there, and it became very profitable. And I was calling on television stations and the TV networks and cable companies, and it was fantastic. And the only one thing I would say that was a regret is that it's very easy to get into your old bad habits. And one of my old bad habits is workaholic, is that I just dove deep into work, deep, deep, deep. Now I was a big brother, and I had Lisa to remind me, and I was playing basketball, but I was maximizing my 24 hours a day, and I was traveling a lot. Because I was so intent on building this business unit up. I had the 7 West Coast states. I flew to Alaska, Hawaii. I was on the road a lot. And so, but there's benefits of frequent flyer miles. But as Lisa told me, I was not in balance.
Right.
I was not
Right.
in balance.
And at
So
that time, Howard, there's one thing that's about working a lot of hours and workaholism, which I know a lot about. I'm in the 12-step recovery for Workaholics Anonymous, right?
yeah.
So there's one thing that's working a lot of hours, and there's another where you really identify with your work, that you think you are your work. Did you ever get to that point, or was it more just super ambitious and working a lot of hours to get certain results?
No, I love the work. Also, I was so happy to be working, and I dove into it. And coming from NCR and AT&T, I had a lot of freedom. The startup, I was making a difference. You're small, in a small pond, making great impact. It was changing the world. I mean, they made television with Betamax tapes and knobs. We were making with a mouse and hard drives, and it was cool because I had early adopters. I had people that were midliners, and then people that would like late adopters. And I love that challenge. I loved it. I enjoyed it. So I dove into it. But lucky I had my wife Lisa that would remind me that, oh, by the way, we have this meeting with this couple's dinner, and we actually had a fundraising event to go to, and don't be late. So I had her doing that there. And so when we moved to Silicon Valley, that was hard because I was at a true startup with 13 employees. I was traveling all over the place, and at that time I sort of went over the edge because it was hard, and I didn't have the resources that I had, and so
And
Lisa
you
sat me
probably
down.
weren't seeing your little brother that often either, if he was in LA, right?
Actually, I flew him up once a month. So that's a whole story. I had to go to the board of directors. When you leave town, they think your match is over. And I said, no, my match is only going to be stronger. I'll be coming to LA a lot, and I'll be coming, and he can come up, and we're not going to get just 4 to 6 hours together. We're going to get a whole weekend together. I'm the only person they ever allowed to do that.
Wow.
I didn't want him to lose those scholarships. So I
Right.
petitioned the board. I was
So the
convincing enough.
scholarships are dependent on him keeping this connection with his big brother for this time.
Correct. I mean, he could have got another big brother, but I didn't want to let him go.
Yeah, for sure.
I didn't want to let him go, and he didn't want to let us go. And his mom, Susan, was grateful for that, and to go to his graduations and be at his wedding. And his mom is passed now, and he basically has us. We have him, and he has us, and it's amazing. So Lisa sat me down. She put an article in front of me that families that eat dinner together, stay together. And also, she was getting that little itch. She was like, "We've been married 7 years. We had a good life, right?
Time for some children."
Yes, we had to call for that sperm sample. So Miracle 1 was the stem cell or the bone marrow transplant. So Miracle 2 was like frozen sperm 11 years later. So we called for it. We started in vitro fertilization. It was very expensive, and Lisa had to grow eggs. And during the harvest, they defrost and they pick the best swimmers, and they inject them out of the 8 eggs that she made, 4, put them back into her, and you wait. And 1 became our daughter Emily. And there's a chapter in the book called "The Miracle Girl," our frozen kidsicle. I mean, think about that conversation with Dr. Rubin, that field trip. how God-given or visionary was
Yeah,
that? I mean,
absolutely.
I could have
Something you
adopted.
never would have thought about at that point, right?
No. And again, still today, I don't believe there's enough physicians that are talking to cancer patients about fertility. They should do that. Um, I was able to have our own child, and it was a beautiful thing. Not as I was saying, I would have adopted or surrogacy. We could have done other stuff, but it was a beautiful thing to have that. And so Silicon Valley also changed because we went from the .com to kind of a changing direction. It crashed in 2000, and I was able to get off the bus and start a nonprofit for the Jewish community. I built some technology. It was an online calendar way before Google Calendar. And I was able to start a nonprofit and be able to then control my time a lot better. It was because I was basically running the small nonprofit, and we were getting adoption in different Jewish cities and things like that. And I love building the code. That's what entrepreneurs do. We build things, we tinker. But I didn't do the code. I told people what to build. But then I got a call from my twin sister. So I got Miracle 1, Miracle 2 with Emily, and then she says, "I'm moving to Michigan." Well, I married a girl from Michigan. Emily's 4 years old. Her kids are 4 and 6. She has twins, by the way, twin four, girl, boy. Girl's 5 minutes older than the boy, just like us.
Interesting, yeah.
Right?
Well, deja vu.
My wife Lisa has a sister that is, has boys 4 and 6. So we come back and we start to look at places here, and we both moved in July of 2005 out of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is expensive. My sister moved from upstate New York, and we basically brought the band back together. The kids grew up together. Got
Oh,
to see
that's
my
awesome.
sister a lot. It was easier for my parents to come out
Right?
to one place and see all grandkids
Yeah,
from
and only
Boston to
halfway
this
across
place.
the country, then all the way across the
Much
country.
easier.
Yeah,
And my in-laws lived here, and we had family here. And so
yeah.
we started our lives again here, and things are great, right? I enjoyed it. I was involved in a couple of the boards in the Jewish community. I was playing. I found a new basketball game, no problem. And I was running two platforms. I was running a platform called PlanetJewish.com, another one called Circle Builder, and they were basically serving the world's largest social network, which is faith and religion. And so I was enjoying it, and I had much more of a balanced life. I was learning, I was maturing, right? And we lived here. It was great. Everything was going well until I go to the doctor at age 50 in March of 2016. He says, "You know what? You're 50. The screening age is 50. It's time for your colonoscopy." I was like, "Oh, okay, great." Now I
So
still
that
had,
whole time
yeah.
in between, so let's say between 25 and 50, you never had any other cancer scares come up. Nothing. It didn't preoccupy you, and you never saw any other evidence of disease, as we would call it now.
No, so I hit the 5 year mark, and I just kept going. I
Right.
stopped doing
Right.
surveillance. They would call you that once in a while, check in, but they basically forgot about you. I
Right.
mean, once I
Which is what
resurfaced.
you want, ideally. I mean, really, it's like,
Nah, well, to me, they're telling me I'm the only known living person from 1990 of a bone marrow transplant that they know about that's alive.
wow, wow.
I mean, from there, from Dana Farber.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
mean, it's a long time, 34 years. So here's what we didn't know. What we didn't know was that having an early onset cancer at 23 can lead to a secondary cancer. I had no idea about that. No one told me about it. I didn't go get screened at 40 or 42. I went at 50 because that was the age. Now the age is 45, unless you have family history, symptoms, and especially if you're a minority community, you should go get screened sooner. Now, so I go in for my colonoscopy, and Lisa's holding my hand. I wake up. I did the cleanse and all that, and I know the doctor. I know the gastro guy, Dr. Phil. And I said, "Dr. Phil, everything's cool, right?" He looks at me with this serious look, and he's got a mask on. He's like, "No, I found something. And when I find something, it's typically bad news." And I just was like, "Huh?" Lisa's holding my hand. She squeezed it harder. And he's like, "I took a piece of it for pathology. I marked it." He goes, "We'll find out quickly." Well, just so happens, and again, I was supposed to go in April, but I was sick, so I actually rescheduled. So it was June 4th of 2016. It was my niece's high school graduation. So my parents and we had relatives in town. So I was on Friday, June 4th, and I came to the evening dinner and then the party, and I had to tell people that they found something, and it could be colorectal cancer. and within a few days of that week, I learned it was colon cancer, stage 3B, means that you actually have some lymph node involvement. And within 10 days, I had 13 inches of my colon removed in what's called a hemicolectomy or colon resection with margins. And they then analyzed that and they confirmed, yep. And well, I didn't have much symptomatic stuff. The things that I got as side effects from the from lymphoma were neuropathy in my hands and feet, but it went away after a certain period of time. I'd always had a very quick, digestive system, and so I thought that I had irritable bowel syndrome, but never really got it diagnosed or treated. Um, but I basically went into this colonoscopy, asymptomatic. And so then they put in a chemo port, and then they actually you do chemotherapy. And so there it is, like lightning struck again. I mean, I've got stage 3. So you look up stage 3, the odds aren't very good. I never recommending Dr. Google on that. Stage 1 or 2, or screening and clipping the polyp, that's great. Come back in 5 years. But I actually had to get back in the chemo chair, and that chemo was intense. And I did in August of 2016. And I have to learn how to say this correctly. It failed me. It failed me. And basically, I had to go do another colon resection because it grew back. And they took 10 more inches of colon in March. And then I went on a clinical trial. And then in July, and I was at the soccer championships and in Dallas, Texas, and I'm not feeling good. But I didn't tell anybody because I'm covering it up. But I could feel things on my ribs, and I didn't sleep well. And finally, I was telling Lisa this, and she called my doctor on me, and he called me, and he says, "You go to Baylor Hospital and go get checked out. I think you might need your gallbladder removed because this is what it sounds like to me." So I said, no, I said, I'm going to watch the game and then I'll go. But one of the other soccer moms was a nurse or an ex-nurse. And one of the moms, they drove me. I said, Emily, go have lunch with this other family. And she did. And we went to Baylor, and this is a hospital that doesn't take emergency units. It's basically for pregnancies and other scheduled appointments. And it's brand new. And so I was the only patient. So they took me in, and I got an ultrasound, and I got all my blood work done, and I got a scan done very quickly that afternoon. And the next morning I called the hospital. I said, I need my results. And they said, nope. I said, no, you have to give them to me. I'm the patient. I said, I'll come by and get them. Just print it out for me. No. I said, well, have the doctor call me. So the doctor called me, and he wouldn't tell me what was going on. He said, I think you better call your doctor back. This is a Saturday. Call your doctor back in Michigan. I was like, no, you have to tell me what's going on.
Yeah. Come on.
And I'm going to need a disc,
right.
Well, he goes, you can come pick up the disc 5 minutes from the soccer field. So I called my doctor, and he said, I got really bad news. Cancer has spread to your liver. We think it's spread to your stomach linings, but it's very hard to tell on the scans, and your bowel. He goes, I want you to come home now. I said, wow. No, I said, I got to watch the championships. I said, it doesn't matter if I come home today, tomorrow, I'll be home Sunday night. So I thought my daughter didn't know, but she knew. The other parents sort of knew. And Lisa was, calling me. And again, this is the digital age. So Facebook, I had, it was different. I was communicating differently. I was also more of a Marine on a mission. Did I have a period of darkness and anger? Oh, yeah. But I quickly said, you know what? I got to live to see Emily graduate high school. She was a freshman in high school. I'm married 22 years. I have more living to do. And so once I went metastatic, I went and I found an online community called Colon Town. And I talked to other people that were in treatment, 5 steps ahead, 10 steps ahead, got to no evidence of disease, got to remission. And I got the support, and Lisa got the support from other caregivers too, because we both
in
needed
that community.
Support. Correct. But being a caregiver is tough. There's 3.5 million unpaid caregivers taking care of elderly parents or children or brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles. It's a hard job. She was trying to raise a daughter, give her some normalcy, take care of all the appointments and all the information coming in, the bills that were coming in. It was hard on her, but she stepped up to the plate and did that. And when you go metastatic, that's when you actually, that time clock is like, get your affairs in order. To have 4% chance of living 6 to 8 to 12 months the sand in the hourglass is going
It's going
faster.
fast. Yeah.
Right. And so I have a very big network of people. I had people praying for me. I had people sending me from books to videos to joke of the day to people taking Emily to soccer, dropping off cleaning supplies, doing everything they wanted to do. And so I ended up taking a salvage chemotherapy regimen and lots of side effects.
Salvage chemotherapy. What does that mean? Salvage
Third
chemotherapy.
line, third line, meaning that it's the Hail Marys. They're trying for
Okay.
the Hail Marys. And actually, I
So
got
if it
this.
doesn't kill you, it might save you.
Yeah, but it also I got some stability, which another good thing happened. So there's progression is bad, stability is good. Okay,
Absolutely. Yeah.
regression is actually really good. Shrinkage,
Absolutely. Yeah.
shrinkage. No pun intended with George Costanza and Seinfeld. Shrinkage for a cancer patient is what you want to hear.
Absolutely.
So I learned about this crazy surgery called cytoreduction hyperintraperitoneal chemotherapy, where they cut you open from chest to pelvic bone. They cut what they can see with microscopic glasses, and they pour hot chemotherapy in you. It's called the mother of all surgeries. And I had that surgery in March 13th. It was a 13-hour surgery. I was in the hospital for 10 days. I had 90 staples down, and then you got to heal. And even that you take scans and blood tests, they don't know what you are because there's so much scar tissue. But about a year and a half later, I got my first no evidence of disease. It was the hallelujah moment. In
Wow.
writing, they said you have no evidence of disease at this time.
And
Big
were there
deal.
more treatments after that massive chemo surgery?
Yeah, you do what's called mop-up chemo. So I did. I did
Okay.
some additional after chemo to knock out anything else that was there. And then I had an allergic reaction to the chemo, and then they stopped the chemo, and it made my blood pressure huge high. I had a blood clot in my leg. So you can't do that chemo anymore. So I stopped after that, and then my last bit of surgery was in I think in January of 20. I actually had some seed cells on my stomach muscle. And so they went in, they cut it out. It was, day surgery, and I was in and out, and that was the easiest thing. And I haven't been on any treatment since then. And it
So
was,
since the first of 2020, so 4 years ago now, you've been no
yeah,
evidence of disease at all.
yeah, a little over 4 years. I'm Ned. That little seed cells, I don't count it, but the official date when I got a Ned report was on September 20th of 2019. But anyways, it doesn't matter. I've been clean, and I'm very lucky, very blessed, very grateful, because I look in the mirror and say that every day, by the way, because many of the people that go through that surgery go through it 2, 3, or 4 times, and it's only supposed to give you life extension for 2 months to about a year. So I'm beating the odds big time
Right,
right
right,
now,
right.
and there are just no guarantees for that. So absolutely, it's March, is colorectal cancer awareness month. So I wear blue. I'm wearing blue sneakers right now. Sometimes
I got my
blue.
blue shirt, my blue
Yeah, I'm
jeans.
wearing a blue shirt, blue underwear, blue hat. Blue is blue, and so it's our color. Every cancer has a color, and I do that because I want people to go get screened, because colon cancer can be prevented if you get screened. Okay, and you can screen by pooping in a cup, which is called Cologuard or a FIT test, or you go for the gold standard of colonoscopy when you're 45, unless you have symptoms, unless you actually have family history, unless you're a minority community, which are the highest diagnosed. But this is the number one cancer for men under 50, and number 2 for women and minorities. It's just unbelievable. So 155,000 people will be diagnosed. 53,000 will die from colorectal cancer,
Wow.
and it's
That's more than die in car accidents. That's more. I mean, that's amazing.
yeah. So it's really important to go get screened and to get checked.
And the Cologuard is super easy. I've done that myself a couple
Not,
times, and then
not
had my
hard.
colonoscopy this year or last year. But
Yeah, you send it into the lab, and the lab tells you hopefully it's negative, and that's the good news, and you're good for a while. But the colonoscopy, they snip the polyp, and then nothing grows, and you come back in 5 years or 8 years, or sometimes I do them every other year now. I was every year. Now I do them every other year. And so the other reason I wear blue is to shout from the rooftops to go get screened. The second is that to honor the people for all cancers that are in treatment. Treatment is hard. It's hard. It affects you emotionally, physically, financially, in relationships, and it is hard. And so I always want to, say something out there for people that are in treatment. And then lastly, I want to always call up the memory of people that their cancer burden was too great and they were called to heaven. I just said the number 53,000 in the U.S. this year.
Yeah, and that's just for
Will die.
colorectal cancer.
That's just colorectal cancer.
Yeah.
And the worldwide numbers are 2.1 million will be diagnosed, and 930,000, almost half of it will die, because in most third world countries they won't get treated; they'll just die.
Right. Right.
And so it's very important. So blue is a lot. And again, I think that basically it's about being intentional, right? I do it intentionally, authentically, and so I walk around with blue shoes at conferences, and when I was spoken in Boston this week. Why are you wearing blue shoes? Oh, I'm glad you asked. So I
I
tell
might
them that.
get myself a pair of blue shoes.
Blue shoes. Well, every cancer, like pink is breast cancer, white is
Right.
lung cancer. Every cancer has a color, and they overlap in months because there's more cancers than there are months. So, I basically got Humpty Dumpty. I get to build Humpty Dumpty again. And so, but this time I did it differently because I went from cancer to COVID.
Right.
And a friend of mine named David Crum, who took me out for a coffee and bagel and was saying goodbye to me because I was stage 4. And he said, "Do you want to write a book, a legacy for Emily and Lisa? Short book, Kindle, whatever, something." I said, "No, it's not on my bucket list. I don't think I could do it. I'm not a good writer." And he says, "Go ask Lisa and Emily." And they laughed at me. I called them back because being entrepreneurial, I thought about this. And I said, David Crum, who's my publisher and editor, I said, "I will write a book with you because I have one request." He goes, "Only one? Most people have like 20. I go, "One request." I said, "If you allow me to interview the most influential, important people in my life over Zoom, we'll take those transcripts. The transcripts can become drafts. The drafts can become chapters. And then finally we'll get a manuscript."
Right.
So yeah, there you go. You got it right there. You got your pages all marked up. And he said, "Okay, I'll have to call you back. We've never done that before." Now, this is about 6 months before COVID, October of 19. So he said, "Howard, every Wednesday for 2 hours, we're going to meet. We're going to start the recordings. We're going to start the whole process. There's 901 steps to write a book, and the 901st is pressing the go button on Amazon." So it took over 3 years, and we ended up doing it, and it launched in October of 22. So that was a 3-year anniversary. But we had way more than 2-hour meetings. I did 158 Zoom sessions. We have way too much content, so we had to narrow it down. And so I went through the book writing process, and the most intense part is the book editing process. And thank God for my wife and David Crum, because they made it readable. And what I did is I did it very differently because I want to invite people into the Zoom rooms, right? I want them to come and experience with families that are arguing about, whose grandmother or Bubby's brisket is better. That's real life. We have
Right.
families. We
Right.
argue. We don't agree. So I was very intentional about the different chapters, about putting calls to action at the end of every chapter. So my book, my publisher calls me. He says, "I need about 5 to 7 endorsements for the back of the book." I said, "I have 100. He goes, "There's no book out there that has 100. So after we looked at all 100, I have 65 that lead my book out of the chorus of praise.
Right. Yeah. And the first page is here. Yeah.
I did it differently. I have 62 pictures. He goes, "That's a lot of pictures." I go, "I want 62 pictures." Actually, I wanted 100, but we got 62. I wanted to put, thank yous to lots of lists of people and lists of names. He goes, "We got to spell those names right." And so the book really takes you through my life, but it shows you the good things, the bad things about living a life, and celebrating those victories. Also, battle down the hatches when things didn't go right. And it's a resiliency that people can actually apply to their own lives, and without forgetting the word hope, because hope was that fuel that got me through. Right? I wanted to see Emily graduate. I was hopeful to see her graduate high school, hopeful to see her graduate college, and I am still hopeful that I will walk her down the aisle at the right time. Right now, she's still only 22.
So those two, amazing stories of coming through, stage 4 cancer twice, which really is miracles. But what was your biggest takeaway if you look back at yourself, of how your life maybe would have been if you had never experienced cancer at all? And not just your life, but your awareness, your development, your spiritual depth. What is the most significant thing that you think you learned by that? Chip Connolly calls cancer a teacher, as cancer is my teacher. He's going through cancer right now. He says, cancer is my teacher. So what was the most meaningful thing, Howard, that you feel like you learned from those two crazy, horrible, miraculous experiences,
And they were analog and digital.
right?
They were also 26 years apart.
Right?
It was very different. So I will tell you that if I probably didn't get cancer, I probably would not be an author, speaker, podcaster. I don't know if
Right?
that I would have just kept the technology
The
trail and
normal, yeah, the normal
yeah,
career
yeah,
path that you would have had, yeah.
yeah. I still would have found my happy place, basketball, because that's
Sure.
just my
Yeah.
passion. I that wouldn't have changed.
And you're
Um,
back to playing now, right?
Oh, I've been playing. Yeah, I actually played through treatment, which is not advised. My doctors were like, "What are you doing? Having a chemo port, you get it knocked out. It's connected to the vena cava. Not a good thing." So I would protect myself for contact. Um, I have, a lot of peripheral neuropathy, but so here's what I really learned. I actually learned that when in your time of need, to be selfish and to accept help. That was
Mm,
one thing.
mm.
I learned from the
And how
first
but
time.
before you jump off of that one, how do you do that, Howard? Because a lot of people will hear that, but it's really a foreign concept to a lot of people. So how do you bring that into reality in the day-to-day?
When people say, "What can I do for you?" I gave them a task.
A specific task that you needed done that would be
Yeah,
really
yeah.
meaningful to you.
I need Emily picked up for soccer. Okay. You can send me a book. You can send me a video. Could you contribute to my GoFundMe because my medical bills are out of control? Um, can you say a prayer? At a minimum, just say a prayer, right? Um, and people, they came, they helped, they donated, they supported, they prayed. It was truly an amazing thing because I didn't want to ask for anything,
Mhm. And I
but
think most people don't, but the fact is that we live in community and people wanna help, and how you can help the team is to ask for help when you need it, right?
so I rallied the troops. So again, it's digital. So I had thousands of people on Facebook and LinkedIn and text messaging and keeping up with all that, checking in with me. People were along for the ride. They were HB Strong. I had T-shirts made up that a friend Bubba Erden made up, and he said HB
Saw it on
Strong.
your race bib here, your half marathon race bib.
They people were cheering me on, and that gave me even more will to live. Okay, and I broke it down into light and darkness. I had to use my light to pick myself back up. I was learning a lot in the darkness two different times. I learned also how strong I was, but I learned what isolation was. I learned what fear was. Okay, and I saw the goodness in people, right? I saw that they chose to be kind, just like in chapter one with what Bubby Bertha says. They chose to be giving. They chose to help me heal. They chose gratitude, and I chose gratitude.
So Howard,
So
you said I learned what fear was. And
yes,
and all of us think we know what fear is, but most of us have not been through a situation like you've been through. So what do you mean by I learned what fear was? What does that mean?
I learned what fear was. Is that I learned that I was going to die at some point in time. I just was praying that it wasn't tomorrow.
Mm, mm. Okay, so
So
you face the reality. Like all of us intellectually know we're going to die at some time, but we ignore it. We pretend we're not. But because yours might be pretty soon, you came to terms with the reality that you actually are going to die at some point. Hopefully, it's not tomorrow. Hopefully, it's not next 6 months. But you came to terms with that reality.
correct. I did. I looked at other people dying left and right in Town, and I also got to be an advocate and join the board, and I really became a student of the disease. And that's what we want to make smart patients. I was so collaborative with my team, much more collaborative than I was with Cancer One. I was collaborative with my team, and we were in this together. We were in it together the first time too, because I called all my old doctors for lymphoma, and they got involved in this as well. And so, but much smarter patient this time. I learned what my biomarkers were, and I was able to help map out the course. And we also made some bad decisions. The clinical trial that I went through in the spring after the second, it didn't work. They kicked me out. I probably should have jumped back on chemo, but
But
I jumped
learning,
on.
but learning what fear was for you was just recognizing that I may not make it, and the
Yeah.
fear of life ending. when you said I learned what fear was.
Correct. There were days I got sent to the hospital, and I had to stay there for 10 days because I had a blood clot and put on blood thinners, and they inserted a filter. And, I had so many hurdles to jump. But on the good days, I maximized the good days, and it was sunny out in Detroit. I'd walk the dog and go for a mile walk, or I'd meet someone else out, and my immune system wasn't as compromised. But I still had to be careful. But I'd meet someone out for coffee. I'd go to a movie at 12 o'clock with Lisa. I was able to do that. We went to St. Lucia on a family vacation.
Love St. Lucia.
I mean, we did some beautiful things. So I maximized those things, and I understood that. But there were many days I woke up and I was curled up in a ball.
Yeah, for sure. But, and how do you feel like, both of these? And you've talked about, Emily as your miracle baby, miracle daughter, but how do you feel like these two transitions, or cancer as a whole, how do you feel like it's affected your relationships as a whole in your life? Like, how are relationships different on this side of both of your cancer experiences than it was before? What's changed in your relationships and how you relate to people?
So I think I was always a good guy, a happy-go-lucky guy, a positive guy. But I am now, the authentic me is here. At age, since 53.
So tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what does it mean to be the authentic guy is here? Like, because I think regardless of people going through cancer or not, I think at this age, this sort of midlife transition, it's a big thing to find authenticity. And what does that mean to you?
So I walk the walk. Okay. I choose kindness. I choose giving. I choose healing, and I choose gratitude every single day. I am intentional about that every single day. Also, I weed out the negativity. I also choose not to hate, and I weed out negativity. I am a very, very mentally tough, disciplined guy about that.
So and when you say weed out, I mean, choosing not to hate is clear, but weeding out negativity, what are the other things you do to pull those weeds, to weed out negativity? What do you or don't you do that keeps the negativity weeded?
So it's a couple different levels. One is that I don't dig deep into this election.
Yeah.
I don't dig. I know what's going on in Israel and Gaza and Ukraine, but I don't have to dig into the guts of it. Okay, have I read some very astute articles on it? Yes, but it's not a super priority to me. I've also
you don't need to get consumed by it. You're not serving. You're not giving by getting consumed by those things.
If I'm going down a path that's leading me into negativity, I'm very disciplined about stopping it. And here's the other hard part: people. Okay, there are people that happen to be negative or not good for you, and sometimes they're relatives or family and friends, and there's people that left my life, and there's so many more people, good people, that have entered my life. So I am very good about spotting that and not having those people. Am I respectful? Yes, but are they in my daily life? No.
Yeah, and I think that's
what I mean by it.
Something I've been thinking about a lot. Interesting for myself as well as my kids and their generation is this balance, or this trade-off between authenticity and belonging. Right? Like a lot of people, a lot of times we give up our authenticity for belonging, especially in a family or in a small community where we maybe have been raised. And I loved what you said a minute ago. You said, yeah, there's a few people that I don't have in my life anymore, but being authentic to myself, I have all these many more great people that I have both belonging and I can be fully authentic with. Right. And I think that's a really hopeful message for me and for others, I'm sure.
Right. And mentorship is I think it's a lost art. So I wrote a discussion guide out of my book called Mentorship is Leadership, because being a mentee and being a mentor, I proved it already with Ian and Jewish Big Brothers, but I mentor just like I was mentored by other colorectal cancer patients. I mentor them now because I'm 5 steps. I'm where they want to be. I want to say, you can get there. You have to own it. You can get there too. I'm not always right, by the way, but I want to give them that light to potentially go there. So, when I say you got to lift up yourself, make sure that your health is good. So the reason I want people to be healthy is to go lift up others. That's why we're called to this earth, really. At the end of the day, really, it's what good you can do, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's the Shining Brightly movement, is to shine brightly as best as you can each day, even if you don't feel like it, okay, for yourself, for others, to make the world a better place. In the world of negativity, in the world of gun shootings, in the world of a lot of other bad stuff going on.
Yeah.
So I'm all
But I
about that.
but I love that, what you're saying here is that like you have to take care of yourself first. You have to heal yourself first so that you can go out and heal the world, so that you can help others. And I think a lot of us we skip that first step. It feels selfish, or it feels, like we don't have time for it, or whatever the case is, but then we have nothing to give from to get, that. And so it is really heal ourselves and then go out and help
Well,
heal others.
if you're on the airplane, they do tell you to put your mask on before you put someone else's mask on, because if
Absolutely.
you're not breathing, you can't do that. So it's important. So lots of learning, lots of maturity. And I'm just thrilled because I have the discussion guide on surviving cancer in life, on mentorship, and then on interfaith, another passion of mine, that of learning about the other. It's rich. It makes you broader. It gives you a more depth in your life. And when you get to know someone that doesn't look like you, or didn't have the same upbringing, or speak like you, or eat the same foods as you. So in a world filled with a lot of negativity and hate, I choose to go the other direction. So I choose to go high, not go low.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Howard, what if you could give one tool from all the transitions you've been through, which are many, and the great life that you have, if you could give one tool to our listeners that they can take home and act on right now, what would that be?
I would go right to Bubby Bertha's teachings. You have the ability today, the tool, to choose kindness, giving, healing, and gratitude. That's the one tool. If you can do that, that's where I'd start.
And how do you recommend, if someone's struggling on any of those chapters or feeling down and they don't have anything to give from, how can they choose that? Like what is the practice? What is, because it's really about a process more than arriving somewhere. What is the process that you would say for them to choose gratitude, kindness, giving, loving?
It's actually quite simple. Take that spotlight off yourself and go do a random act. Buy someone a cup of coffee. Go call a friend that is sick. Go send a selfie to someone. Say, I care about you. It's very simple. It's not about you. Go shine that light on somebody else. It takes that off of you, and you're actually done something good. Your endorphins will actually light up, and it's actually quite easy to go do any of those things of kindness, giving, healing, or gratitude to someone else.
Awesome.
That's the application.
Awesome. No, that's great. And that is so true. I know from my own experience as well, to remember it's not about me. Oh, that's great. And that's a great tool. I mean, there's so much we could spend time on, Howard. It's such an interesting life and such an inspiration. Where can listeners find out more about you?
Thank you. So it's real simple. ShiningBrightly.com has the book. It has my speaking for motivational speaking. It actually has the podcast, which is Jammin', the Shining Brightly Show, which is every Wednesday, and also has my advocacy. So I want people to see the whole person. So I want them to see the cancer advocacy. I want them to see the entrepreneurship advocacy, the interfaith advocacy. So you can find me there, and I'm very interactive. I will personally reach back out to you. You don't get anybody else. I actually do it. And I love it when people put on their sunglasses and they shine brightly with me.
Hey, I love it. There's the trademark sunglasses. Howard, I really, really appreciate you being with me today. Not only fascinating, but also very inspiring, very uplifting. So thank you. You're definitely shining brightly on Life in Transition podcast. Thank you for being here.
Love it, Art. Thank you for having me.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.